I want to thank you all for attending this session. It's going to be the first of about 18 sessions over the course of the next 2 months. And these are, I would argue, the best possible thing that you can do is attending these sessions if you want to be successful in recruiting at some of the firms that you're seeing here on the screen right now. If you want to apply to McKinsey, I'm a former I'm an alumni of BCG, right? Bain, Deloitte, PwC. All of these companies have a very high bar in terms of the application process, the resume, the interviews, and ultimately you don't just want to know the process of applying for consulting, but you want to know how you can make the most of it and ensure that every single interview that you step into, you can seal the deal on the job. That's the big thing that we focus on is, your resume may or may not get you in the door, but once you are in the door, once you have that interview set up, you're gonna get the job every single time. And I know that that's a lot to claim, but we really feel passionate and pretty confident that we can get you there. But what's gonna be really important is that you're consistently attending these sessions and you're taking notes. It's not enough just to passively digest this information. It requires you to take that extra step to figure out how all of this information is going to fit into how you apply to these firms, and that'll be what drives success for you. So the first step, as many of you all have done, is to show up. So really excited that you all are here. Now let's hop into some more of the content. Again, this is a masterclass series that I was working with GBSA to ensure that we could get this information out to all of the MBAs. I'm hoping that it picks up over the next couple of weeks and that there's signals of interest, because if there is, then that means that this will continue for many, many, many more semesters and years into the future. And none of that is going to be possible if people don't show up, right? As you can imagine, consultants have a high opportunity cost of time. And I think that a lot of the small little tidbits of information that really put people above and beyond are really hidden in the rough. So the goal is to bring this out, but it's going to be difficult to bring it out if we don't get interest. So be sure to tell anyone that is interested in consulting about this masterclass, as well as anyone that's trying to step up their interview skills, whether that's fit or just general problem solving. The firm belief that strong case prep is going to enable you for any job that you approach. So whether that is consulting or maybe that's product management, right? So my MBA at Olin, the focus was in product management marketing. And I was perfectly confident to walk into the strategy and analytics rotation program interview for LinkedIn, just doing the consulting case prep that I had done for BCG. So there's a lot of cross applicability there, and you want to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success across the board. If you do this, it's kind of like a catch-all, because it's like pursuing the hardest version of interviews. The one exception would be perhaps investment banking, where there's a lot more technical knowledge, or like computer science focused programming, those types of roles you're not going to get from this. But any type of marketing role, any type of operations role, any type of human resources or talent management role, or any type of general management and consulting role, if you know how to case prep, you're going to be set up for success with any of these interviews. I went into a consortium as a consortium alum, and it wasn't too hard to kind of sweep the floor on interviews just by using the frameworks that we're going to be talking about in the next couple of weeks. So really want to drive that forward. Like I went into, Cambridge Associates for one of their top internships in strategic management. And I didn't know anything about wealth and asset management, and I ended up getting the role just because I was using the fundamentals in case prep for that. So I don't say that so much as a brag, but rather to say that this is important and you only have to learn it once. So I want to make sure that you all are learning it correctly the first time, and then taking this and proliferating it across the rest of campus, because the reason that I'm doing this is I want to see Olin on the map, and I want to see more folks from Olin in places like BCG Chicago, because it's pretty lonely being the only person there. Luckily, we're getting some more engagement with McKinsey St. Louis because we are the St. Louis school. But I just think that Olin students have a very unique perspective on the world that's not being represented as much as I would like in some of these ivory towers. So let's get into these ivory towers. Let's grab the salary that we all deserve, and let's actually create some positive change. So I'm going to give a little bit of a background on myself and my philosophy and how I go about teaching. And this entire first session, I want to apologize if someone is pretty far on their consulting case prep journey, because this first session might not be super useful to you. And if you want to drop off because of that, that's fine. I would say the one thing is to stay until the agenda, which is going to be in about 2 or 3 slides at the very least, because I will show you what the next 18 classes are going to look like, and I'll give you a quick blurb about what you can expect. So as much as I anticipate that a lot of people will do a pick and choose across the 18, which is fine because you're not getting a grade for this, but if you really want to get as much use out of this as possible, I would say attend all 18. The one exception is this first session is going to be a lot about like what is a case and how is it structured. So if you've been doing case prep for the last 3 months or 4 months, you're going to be like, of course, Austin, I know this, and that's okay. My goal is that we get everyone on the same playing field at the very beginning. So if you don't know that and you're like, wow, there's a lot of good information in this first session, that's the hope, is that everyone's going to be on the right playing field after the session. So a little bit of information about me. Like I said, I'm a WashU MBA. I'm actually also a WashU undergraduate. So I've been doing casing for quite a bit because I was casing during undergrad, even though I was not in the business school. So my undergraduate degree was from WashU, where I was studying economics and international studies in the College of Arts and Sciences, so liberal arts. And I had no support, right? Because the WashU Career Center that's not Weston isn't really focused on consulting, and I didn't know any of what we're about to talk about for the next 45 minutes. So that was also part of why I wanted this to be a bit slower burn on the first session. Then I ended up becoming a 3+2 student in the midst of the COVID pandemic. In 2020, I decided to apply and was accepted to Olin, and essentially made the leap from I was doing some internships with like Bank of America in their treasury and sales department. The following summer, my MBA summer, I leaped up into ZS Associates, where I took up their internship in Evanston. Most of it was remote because of COVID, but that was a fine experience. I can speak a lot to the pharmaceutical industry and to their sales and executive compensation departments, as well as their D&I model, if anyone has interest in that, and in ZS, because they have a unique split between their strategy, insights, and planning consultants, their SIPCs, and then their decision analytics consultants, which is, if you're international, which I know that some of you all said, Mumbai, Nairobi, I don't know if you can get sponsorship through the SIPC, but you can get the sponsorship through the DAC. So happy to talk about that. I'm throwing all of this out in hopes that you will actually put stuff down in the chat with any questions that you have throughout this entire journey, because it's going to be kind of a little bit lonely, like being a talking head for the next hour. So I'm going to ask some things, which is, I would like you all to fill out that attendance if you haven't already. I know that we've got some new joiners, but then if you have any questions, especially in this first session, as we're talking at very high level, throw them in the chat and we will get them answered, because as you'll see in a second, I am affiliated with BCG as such that I'm an alumni, but I am actually working on a completely new project now. So I can speak to all of my time at CS and all of my time at BCG and all of my time recruiting with McKinsey and with Bain and with Deloitte and with all of these other companies without having to, sell a peach if it's not a peach, right? So take that how you will. But basically what I'm saying is, there is not a question that I will not give an honest answer to. And that's not always an easy thing to find whenever you're recruiting, because everyone's trying to tell you that they have the best thing since sliced bread. I'm here to say there's a lot of good and there's a lot of bad, because the world is complicated, and I'm going to try and give you as honest of a perspective as possible, with the expectation that you then triangulate that across a bunch of different areas. And I'll teach you how to actually triangulate my information, because I carry a strong conviction in my perspective. But if you only listen to my perspective, then you're not thinking for yourself. You're not thinking authentically. So I'll actually show you how to network and get the answer that is the most true. I'm giving you one perspective. So after ZS, I ended up taking a full-time job with BCG in their Chicago office, and I just left this last month. So I worked as a senior associate and a consultant, and I had a pretty good time there. So I'll speak a little bit to the work that I did, but as it relates to why that's important for you all is that not only was I working as a consultant, so I know exactly what the work looks like, but I was actually also selected as WashU's global recruiting specialist, which means that I was the point person for all things WashU recruiting. I will tell you all right now that the reason that in the last year, I don't know if these names will be familiar, but like Divya or, oh my gosh, his name starts with a T. But then Tyler McMurray is another one. There are a lot of folks, many of whom that like I trained, that are now working at McKinsey St. Louis. We actually have a pretty great showing at McKinsey St. Louis. It's because we are a target school at McKinsey. The reason that I was the only person in my class to go to BCG, and why the year before Marshall Pollock and I think there was one other individual went down to Miami, is because we're actually not a target school for BCG. And I'm telling you that right now, so that way you all know that there is an additional hill whenever you're not a core school. McKinsey St. Louis, you are a target school. BCG Chicago, you are not a target school, and you do not have a strong network. So you have to do some additional lifts. We'll talk about how to do those lifts. BCG Miami, you are not a target school in the MBA program, but you are advantaged in that the former head of BCG Miami is a WashU undergraduate alumni. And I believe Marshall is still working as a project leader there. And I actually might bring him in to talk over some of the future sessions. So a lot of great things to think about. But I also say that the global recruiting specialist part is important because I was in the room where all of the decisions were being made about like, okay, is this recommendation going to go forward? How do they actually track? What do they track? How does networking actually get valued whenever we're looking at successful or not successful candidates? What is the scoring system? And this isn't all... I mean, the actual names are confidential, but like the process, I can actually speak to that black box. So I will speak to it at a high level. If you want to know the specifics, the chat is right there. So ask me, because it's a black box. And if you don't investigate the black box, you're never going to see the light inside the box. And then now, if you're curious, I've transitioned into a new role in the last month full time, but I've been slowly working on it for the last, ever since about November, October, which is Cohort. It is the first product in the nation that gives private quality, affordable college admissions guidance. So currently it costs about $6,000 for the average college guidance package from a private counselor. And we've systematized it and we're giving it away for just $100 a month for 6 months. And I'm basically in charge of building out how do we connect these Fortune 100 ERGs into our offering, and how do we work with high schools, and how do we work with regional extracurricular organizations to drive traffic. So that's kind of the work that I do now, and I use a lot of the stuff that I had learned in BCG. And some of the stuff in BCG, I will say, in just consulting, is antithetical to entrepreneurship. So there are some things that are really great that help complement entrepreneurship, and there are things that actually destroy entrepreneurial activity. If you want, we can talk about both of those, but we have, many sessions in the future to go over these topics. And I'll also say that, this is a paid entrepreneurial gig, right? We were pre-funded by the top education technology VC firm in San Francisco. So a little kind of, if anyone's considering entrepreneurship, I will let you know that it does not have to be the horrible, like, don't take a paycheck for 3 years kind of thing. You're not going to be making BCG money, but you can make six figures is what I'll say. If you fundraise right and if you find the right connections, right? I'm now working with former Stanford, former Harvard alums, and that is all thanks to the network that I built at BCG, 100%. So that's what I'm doing now. In terms of consulting work, did some business operations, some product launches, some workforce planning. So like strategic human capital work would be another way to say that in the financial technology space. Some racial equity work, because D&I and climate and sustainability, those two areas were really important to me. And I wanted to get that exposure while I was at BCG. So I actually had a list of things I wanted to tackle while I was there, and I got to do all of it. And that was actually why I ended up finishing up and moving on to the next thing, because I actually checked off all of my boxes. So that's just the way that I operated. I was like, all right, I got everything that I wanted to do. I didn't really want to do it for another 4 years before I got into a management role, or 2 years before I got into a management role. So I found something really interesting. And then I got a lot of exposure into proprietary processes. So I'm giving you the titles right now: demand-centric growth, end-to-end demand generation, org builder, and organizational resilience are 4 examples of proprietary processes that I got to work on. I cannot tell you what these processes are, because that would be breaking a lot of like contracts. And that's part of the shielded nature of consulting in a lot of ways, but I can get close and I can talk to you about general concepts and ideas. So if you're interested about proprietary processes and what actually gives top management consulting firms the ability to charge millions of dollars, and I can tell you how many millions if you're interested, to these Fortune 100s, I can speak a little bit to that. So be sure to ask those questions. And I love that we're already getting started with Yabsira on this question of how does networking impact our ability to get recruited? How much does it matter? I'm going to write that down because we will talk about that. We have an entire session dedicated to networking, but I can give a quick little teaser to that because we'll talk about it in a little bit. Great. Let's keep going. Really quick, I'm not going to beat a dead horse here, but my casing experience is about 6 years. Received offers from a bunch of different top consulting firms. I actually worked as a peer case coach, so maybe some of them are on the call right now that are operating as peer case coaches. Hello. We very much appreciate and value you, because you are the best option that MBAs have to get up and running really quickly. So shout out to OSCA. OSCA was an incredible organization that I was a part of during my entire MBA process, and I just couldn't say enough great things about OSCA in propelling me forward in terms of my connections to consulting and the firm research. And the peer case coaches, I did not leverage them because I actually was pretty far on my journey. But whenever I became one, it actually made me a better caser. So that's another thing I'll say is, if you really want to become a better caser, learn how to teach other people to case, because it's been said that in a room of one teacher and 50 students, the person that's learning the most is the teacher. It's not the students. So I'll just put that in your brain in terms of thinking about working as a case coach. Okay, and then those are some of the successful placements from MBAs and undergrads. Here's the big agenda overview that I wanted to share. And then if you feel like you're an expert in the structure of the case, feel free to hop off. And then I would say it's really important that you show up to the March 1 event on essential frameworks. But I really want to drive home what this entire class is going to look like, because I also want you all to provide some thoughts on what else you would like to see. Because this is the first time we're doing this, if there's something that doesn't exist here, let me know. And I know that I sound like like I'm beating a dead horse here, but if you do not ask, you're not going to get. It's the exact same with consulting interviews as it is with this. So you really just have to ask the right questions. And if you ask the questions, I will make time to build it out. This is my current syllabus because I'm not being paid I'm not being paid a professor's salary to teach this. I can really change it however I want. So I want to make this as useful as possible to you all. Okay. Today, we're going to be talking about the structure of the case and fit overview. So just a high level, what is consulting, what does the case look like, what does fit look like, and what are some best practices. Then on Friday, and I believe the current timing, let me double check. This is going to be the same every single week. So every single week, there's going to be a session at 7 o'clock Central on Wednesday, and then again at 8:30 a.m. on Friday. And if you're thinking, oh, that's too early, how am I ever going to wake up for that? If you can't wake up for that, then you probably aren't going to be set for a life in consulting. And if you don't want to come to the 7 o'clock class, similarly, like, that's part of consulting. If you don't like that, totally valid, right? Consulting is not for everyone, and I don't think it's sustainable for most people, if we want to talk about that. But it's just like, you should learn how this works if you want to do it. And if you decide you don't want to, that's great too. Okay, we're going to do that. Then on Friday, we're going to talk about essential framework. So we're going to hop into three big frameworks. One is going to be the 4 Ps of marketing. So we're going to talk about how does the 4 Ps of marketing actually come up across frameworks, and how can you leverage it in a bunch of different cases to really blow away your interviewer. We're going to talk about Porter's 5 Forces. If you took Horn's managerial economics class, he talks a lot about Seth Carnahan, I think it's in his strategy class. Maybe they both talk about it, but we're going to do a deep dive as to how that relates to frameworks and building out really compelling answers on competitive analysis. And then the biggest and most helpful framework is the 8 big buckets. And the 8 big buckets is actually from a book that I highly recommend. It's right here. So it says Hacking the Case Interview. There it is. And it's by Taylor Warfield. I actually got this book for free from BCG. They sent it to me whenever I was a Bridge to Consulting extern. And they said, this is how you should learn how to case. So, if they tell you that that's how you should learn how to case, then I decided that was how I was going to learn how to case. And I think it's better than case in point. It gave me this framework that I use as a baseline for everything that I do. So definitely check it out, but also you don't have to buy it because we're going to talk about it on Friday. Just show up to class, okay? I'm going to go a little bit quicker now. March 6th, quant and mental math. If you don't know how to add things into your head, and if you can't do just about any algebraic equation, so percentages, adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing in your head, it's actually a lot easier than you think it is. We just use tens is the quick answer, but we'll teach you how to do that. We'll teach you how to flow your math on a piece of paper, and we'll show you quant. So you don't actually need to know a million different equations. Really, you just need to know like 5 equations. We will show you all 5 of those equations. And then the trick is that why it looks like it's so many equations is because of the profit equation. The way in which you can change the profit equation makes it look like there's 20 different equations, but it's really just variants of the profit equation, and then also knowing the difference between profit and profitability. So we will hop into that. Knight, I love it. I'm writing this down, and we will talk about it. So I'm curious about the specifics that go into selecting successful candidates for consulting. That will be answered on the secret sauce slide decks. So look at March 20th and March 27th. That's going to be super, super helpful for you. We talk about affiliation as a method of getting an offer in recruiting. And then also the networking chat on the 13th will be helpful. We'll talk about it a little bit today as well. Okay. Nope, we still got some more. So then we're going to do some case deep dives. I highly recommend that you hop on these case deep dives, and I'm going to ask one additional thing. If you, and I sure hope that you are, because if you do accept this, then I think that you're probably more likely to be successful in your case journey, because it means that you're taking a risk. And if you're not going to take risks, one, like, why did you get the MBA? Like, you should really be pursuing risk whenever you can. But 2, you're not going to get like the top offers because you're going to be playing it safe, and you really need those out of the box answers. So an easy way to take risks is in a no failure zone where like we're just learning. On these case deep dives, I'm going to reach out to people that attended and say, would you be open to being a guest for this upcoming case deep dive. And I'll have like 3 to 5 folks that'll be on camera. And then all 3 to 5 of us will work together to answer the case. And this is going to give you the most direct attention possible to take your casing up to the next notch. And then all of the audience members can watch, and hopefully they do it as well in their downtime. I know that was hard for me. Like in 2020 and 2021, I was just laying on my bed and not doing half of the PowerPoints and half of the work that I was being asked, just because I didn't see value in it. And if you don't see value in it, that's fine too. But just know that like you're making an active decision. So I hope that you all will really jump into these deep dives, because we're going to be getting into the nitty gritty. Okay. Then resume review and networking. We're going to show you exactly how to format and structure your resume. You should already have that from the Weston Career Center, but there are some nuances on consulting that are important. How to specifically network. We're going to talk about the trifecta, the 3 folks that you should engage with whenever you're doing networking for a firm. Then we'll do another deep dive on casing. We'll do some tips to get the offer in the final round. Another deep dive, and then negotiation affiliation strategy. Night, that's going to be exactly what you're going to want to attend 1000%. That's going to be super helpful for you. Then another case deep dive. Then we go into April. April is understanding the differences between firms. So if you have a question in your head, which is like, I feel like all of these firms are the same, and that you're really just fighting on prestige. One is that you're not entirely wrong on that, but you are a little bit wrong in that there are some critical differences between a BCG and a Bain and a McKinsey and a Deloitte, a Big Four and a boutique. So there are industry differences. There are geographic differences. There are cultural differences. There are work-life balance differences. And there are like moonshot differences. Like, I don't know if you all know, but BCG's 2 moonshots, we have specifically 2. It is climate and sustainability. And might I add, before the ChatGPT explosion, our second moonshot was AI. Right? So artificial intelligence. And these are things that we're taking huge bets in. How does making big bets on moonshots look like? Well, it looks like investing or subsidizing clients to take on climate and sustainability work, so that way you can sell in the future, build up those relationships, and ultimately like drive long-term profitability for the firm. We'll talk about that, but like at a very high level, we're going to figure out how to communicate differences between top firms, so you actually know. Whenever they ask, why are you interested in McKinsey? You don't say, I know you won't say it, but you'll be thinking like, well, it pays a lot of money and it's really prestigious and looks good on a resume and the network's great and I like the people, right? Those are all probably true, but they're not sufficient answers. You need to know what the current research is, and we'll talk about that. Now into the fit deep dive. So it is true that the fit portion of the interview is as important, if not more important. And I'll say this, whenever you're doing case interviews at top firms, it's almost as if the case interview is a prerequisite. Kind of like how if you're going to go to, let's just say like Olin. Olin's probably like, what, maybe a 700 GMAT, and if you have like a 540, you're not going to get in kind of thing. Like that's not a hard rule, but like it's almost like you need at least a 6 on your GMAT score in the first digit to get in, right? It's that kind of thinking where you need a great case, but that is not sufficient. You need a great case, and you have to demonstrate really strong communication and presence skills on your fit deep dive, or on your fit portion. So we'll talk about storytelling. We'll talk about purpose-oriented answers and disarming. If you don't know what those are, that's why you're here, right? I hope that we can teach you all quite a bit. April 10th, I'll do a BCG deep dive. If you all are interested in having a speaker from BCG that is not me come in, let's talk about it. I can bring in a managing director if you want. I can bring in a project leader or a consultant. Just like send me an email with what you're thinking, as well as I'll probably have a submission form later. But that's my personal email. Obviously, don't spam me. But like, I want this to be helpful for you all. So let me know how we can improve upon this this series of sessions. Then we're going to go into a final deep dive on case. We'll talk a little bit about consulting as a sunset industry. If you think about your long-term play, are you trying to pursue the MDP partner path, or are you trying to do your 2 years and out? We'll have that really interesting conversation. I'll probably bring in some panelists. Then April 19th, a second deep dive on fit. We'll talk about strategic questions, which are different than just regular questions that you ask at the end of an interview. Expert research, and then demonstrating interest across the entire recruiting timeline. And then the last two are kind of up in the air. I have a super big passion for purpose-oriented career mapping. I'm actually writing a book right now called The Next Move, and it builds on this framework called the Purpose Pinwheel. It discusses how we balance 4 different variables, which is compensation, fatigue, value creation, and learning, and how there are trade-offs in all of these decisions that we make, and how you can actually orient all 4 of those things around a purpose, a statement, and live really a more exciting and fulfilling life, which I think a lot of people struggle with, particularly people that are interested in consulting, because when you're interested in consulting, a large driver is compensation without much regard for the fatigue element, because you're going to be working 60 plus hours a week. So we can talk about that. Or we cannot. If you want to have a different conversation, send me an email. And then the last one's going to be a semester review and ask me anything. Okay. This is the current syllabus. I believe in strong convictions, loosely held. So this is my current strong conviction. I hope that you all enjoy it. If you're like, some of these are going to be a waste of time, I want you to tell me that. Be very blunt, and then we'll change it. And we'll go from there. So with that, let's actually get into the content today. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about a couple of things. What do consulting interviews actually test? That's going to be really important. We're going to talk about how are interviews structured? What are the parts of the case interview? What types of cases can I expect? Parts of the fit interview, and then best practices for the fit. So again, high level overview, and then we're going to leave some time at the end, which should happen every single class that we do, for questions where you can actually do a live call in. So the final thing I'll say before we hop into the content today is that obviously, if you didn't notice, you're on something that you probably haven't seen before, which is Riverside FM. It's a fantastic platform. I could not suggest it enough. I am going to be using it extensively for my work with Cohort, as well as podcast creation, as well as most virtual events, because it just works. It just works, and you want a tech platform that works and is great for recording. That does not mean that I will be sharing these recordings, because the expectation is that you all show up as if it was a class. That is how this should, that's the anticipation, is like, you've got 3 hours just like you would any other class to attend here. But in this, I think you all can see that there is an option to do a live call-in. That is how you're going to be asking questions live. And I would love that. So that way I'm not just talking into the void the whole time. I don't mind talking into the void, but I would appreciate actually hearing from you all and meeting you all. So it just makes it a little bit less lonely, which is why, like, if you want me to be a little bit less lonely on this session that we're running, like, put in whatever comments you can into the chat, because it makes this more exciting for me rather than just lecturing content. I don't want to lecture content, but if there's no other option, I will, because I want you all to have this information. Okay. With that said, let's get into what do interviews actually test. Whenever we think about consulting interviews, every firm is going to have a different perspective on things that they're looking for, but they all revolve around a very similar set of themes, okay? So these are not mine up above the gray line. These are BCG's, and I think that BCG is a great base to use, because, as you'll find out later, if you can recruit for BCG, you can recruit for just about any firm. There's this whole aspect of interviewer versus interviewee, and the conviction that Studio E holds and that I hold is that if you can do interviewee, you can do interviewer. I'm saying that as someone who's done several of both. but here's what folks are looking for. So let's actually take a quick look. 5 interview tips and tricks to help you succeed. This is directly from the horse's mouth. Prepare thoroughly, be yourself, be enthusiastic, evaluate us, and ask questions. Okay, so I'm going to take a quick 20-second step back, and I want to see in the text, I see several members here. Type in, what do you think these actually mean? What does it, so write in, prepare thoroughly, and then give your own perspective on what does it mean to prepare thoroughly as you're getting ready for casing. Be yourself. What does that actually look like as you're preparing for casing? I will step back for about 20 seconds, and then we'll hop right into it. I do not mind awkward silence, especially whenever I'm the only person on camera, so I hope that doesn't freak you out either. I love it. So continue to put some of those thoughts into the chat. I'm going to talk to a couple of them. I love the point of, I think this is testing if I am like BCG. This is exactly what it is testing, okay? And I cannot stress this enough, and I'm so glad that, Yabsira, that you brought this up, because when they say be yourself, I think a lot of people will conflate this with bringing your authentic self to the interview. Whenever I started my consortium rounds of interviews back in 2020, I was very much like, you should 100% bring every single sense of your authentic self to an interview. Do I still think that? I think that there is so much more nuance to what is authentic and what is it about yourself, in the same way that you would not behave with your friends the way that you would behave with a managing director at a top firm, right? The same way that you would engage with Obama if you met him in person, right? So whenever they're telling you to be yourself, they're saying bring your best self within the context of their firm and their brand. So there is a way to be like BCG, and there is an archetype that succeeds at BCG. The goal for you is to know how to be that archetype when you need to be it. You need to know the rules of the game before you can break any of the rules. Okay, and I really want to hit that home, is that you need to know how to be yourself within the context of the interview that you are in. Okay, love that, Yabsira. Daphne, how are you able to disseminate or thoroughly describe acquired information? Yes, right? So this is becoming more and more important with generative AI, and I have seen firsthand how generative AI is being implemented and executed in consulting firms, and then by affiliation, some of these Fortune 100 companies. The TLDR is that it's coming by, I think, at a slower pace for some of these large companies because of regulatory worries and because of power in politics. If you're interested in knowing a lot more about that, I highly recommend Trish Gorman's class. She is a fantastic professor, and it was one of my most useful classes. But I say all of that to say there's so much information that's going out now that the value add is not in the provision of information, but in the distilling of information. In the same way that consultants love to, toot their flute about how many slides that they can make in an hour in a day, and they're like, wow, I'm just churning out slides, I'm pumping out slides. And that's actually not super value add for the company if they all just end up in the appendix. And oftentimes, you can look on the Instagram memes, but a lot of these will end up in the appendix. So you need to know how to take a lot of information, which we get a ton of information, such that we have to use programs like Alteryx and SQL and Tableau to organize it all and then distill it into a simple message. And that's something that they actually teach us very, very well at a place like Boston Consulting Group, is how do you take this information that is super, super complex and just do one message per slide. That's actually something that I'm probably not doing a very good job of on this slide, but that's the whole idea. So great, love that. Prepare thoroughly to me entails knowing what the company is all about and what the role entails. Absolutely. Do your research. We have an entire session on firm research, so I will lay some little seeds there, and then we'll talk about that in the upcoming weeks. Practice cases, 1000%. And then evaluate us. This is an interesting one. Let's see what you have to say. Interview and vet them just as they are doing. Yes. Okay. So this is true. I am giving a perspective that I have come to believe over my time with interviewing a lot of different firms. And it might be a hot take. Actually, I think it is a hot take, but triangulate and develop your own perspective. My perspective is that it's important for BCG to know if you're a fit for them, and it's important to know if you are a fit for BCG. But there's a power dynamic that is not being acknowledged in this, which is that BCG's resources and wealth pool and network means that they get to tell you no before you get to tell them no. Okay? It's an unfortunate reality that, the prestige plays such a heavy hand, but if you are going to be successful in recruiting, your utmost priority should not be, is this a fit for me? It should be, how do I get the job in the interview while staying a balance of authentically myself and truthful, and also being able to cater to the reality that is I'm applying to a top tier corporate consulting firm. Okay, we can talk about that a lot more because I think that is a bit of a hot take to say nowadays, but it's absolutely important, right? Now, there is something to say for if you try to apply to everyone, you try to get into every single firm, then you're just spreading yourself too thin, and that's not a good use of your time. So you need to find a balance. We'll talk about that throughout the course of the class. But fantastic. I love this engagement. Let's keep this up. So some of the big things that they talk about: intellectual curiosity, creative thinking, integrity, drive, and collaborative mindset. These are things that if you're applying to BCG, you should memorize them. You should put them in a document, write them down, and review them. And we'll talk about what that document looks like throughout the class. But ultimately, as I see it, there are 5 big things that are being tested, which is reasoning, problem solving, firm fit, business acumen, and communication skills. So analytical reasoning, are you able to think logically and mathematically? Problem solving, if there is something that does not work, can you troubleshoot it? Firm fit, will you be upset after X number of months or weeks or years at this job, and do they actually do work that you believe in? And also, can you be social with the folks that also work at this company? And that comes into evaluating the differences between companies, which we'll talk about in early April. Business acumen. Are you actually competent in business fundamentals like finance and accounting? Hopefully the MBA will take care of that. That's all I'll say on that. And then communication skills. Can you be in a room with a senior executive, an SVP, or in an MBB's case, like a CEO or C-suite member, and tell them what they should do and actually get them to do it? That's like perhaps the best definition of what consulting is we are in the business of influencing people with a lot of money. Okay, so if you can't influence people through strong communication skills, you're going to have a hard time getting into some of these firms. And it's a learned skill, which is the fantastic part about it. All right, let's keep the train going. How are interviews structured? So there are a couple of different ways in which they're structured. But this is normally how it looks nowadays. You have an online case, and this online case normally takes about 30, 45, sometimes an hour, but it's in that ballpark. And you're talking with a chatbot. So with BCG in particular, the chatbot, her name is Casey the chatbot. And she will give you a bunch of short prompts to which you will have to answer with short responses, and you'll have some multiple choice as well. Now, this is a little bit of a teaser for actually diving deep into this, but with chatbots, you want to respond the exact same way that you're receiving information. So you should be thinking like a computer scientist, and that you should be logic oriented, because you do not know how those short responses are going to be evaluated. You don't even know if they're going to be evaluated by a human. But then also, in consulting format of being simple and concise, you should really bullet everything out. So we'll talk a lot about how to build lists in almost every answer that you present, but that'll be super important. And then the final part of the online case for most cases is a final video. So most people don't know this, because it's like for BCG, for example, it's broken up into two different parts. And the first part is a bunch of short response and multiple choice, whereas the second part is a video. But people don't really recognize that you're about to get a video where you have to present for 1 minute your final recommendation. So you'll have people that are not dressed accordingly, or you'll have people that were not prepared and didn't actually take the time in which the timer stops between part 1 and part 2 to actually just write out your recommendation. You've got all the time in the world because the timer stops. So take advantage of it. This is something that you probably wouldn't have known if you didn't take this session. So that whenever you present your final recommendation, you don't have it memorized, but you've got it pretty darn memorized, where you can just look down the barrel of the camera and present, we should do X because of reasons A and B. Looking forward, I'm worried about risk 1, which can be mitigated through next step, 2. We'll talk a little bit about what those templates look like, but that's what you should be shooting for. Okay. Does this interview process apply for folks entering as engagement managers and other senior levels beyond consulting? Yes. So if you're applying to be a project leader or a engagement manager, so engagement manager I believe is McKinsey, and project leader is BCG, and manager is ZS and Bain, you're still going to have to do a case. You might skip the online case, but you're going to have to do basically a round of fit and then actual case interview. Now, I will say, it doesn't matter how much experience that you have. Like, you could be, unless you're an executive MBA on this call, if you have 10 years of experience and you're going into the MBA program and you're trying to go to a BCG, a Bain, or a McKinsey, and even most of the other firms too, they will start you off at the post-MBA level. Like, everyone starts back at the 192 salary or the 175, depending on where you go. So just keep that in mind, which is why I make a huge argument for get the MBA done sooner rather than later. I know that it's too late to make that kind of decision, but it pays dividends. So then you go on to the primary round. Primary round is going to be 30 minutes to an hour. Normally 2 interviews. So I believe that BCG will do like 45 and 45. And it'll be a combination of fit and case. It might be in person. It might be a Zoom. I think it's leaning more towards online, just because from a cost structure perspective, hiring folks is really, really expensive. And consultants and enterprise team members at these top firms are paid pretty well. So think about like the cost of the salary for an hour lost from one of these consultants, right? And then think about it again for final rounds. In MDP time, they're charged sometimes $10,000 for 1 hour of their time, right? If you're a senior MDP. So your case could literally be worth $10,000 of lost time. It'll be a combination of fit and case, and then it'll end with questions. If there's time, there should always be time. If there is not time, then we did not do something right over the course of this class in teaching you how to be concise with your answers and be quick. That should be a non-issue if you attend all of these sessions. Okay, that's a promise that I'll make. And then the final round interview. So there are about 1 to 3. I know whenever I was with McKinsey, in their final round, I got interviewed by all 3 of the founding managing directors in the St. Louis office. I can't remember their names, but they were all very interesting in how they approached it. They're really big in like natural gas and energy, I remember, and one of them was like a former Marine or Navy, Army, something like that. So anyway, they'll talk a lot more about fit, and the questions that they'll ask will often relate to their job experience because they want to know if you carry that executive presence because they are an executive. So there's a lot more focus on small talk, but then also the case is going to be hard. So just keep that in mind. Okay. How to stand out. I actually think that this was very close to what one of the questions up top, which is, specifics of successful candidates in recruiting. Let's just talk about all four of the areas at a high level. We're going to dive deep so that way you know exactly what to do in all of these in future classes. On the resume review and the IQ test, these are two things that actually precede the first case. You need a strong resume. So what does that look like? That looks like a well-formatted resume. It looks like a nice pedigree, but if you don't have a nice pedigree, which you may not, it's something that you can't really change now, you have entrepreneurial experience, which is why you should be hitting up Doug to get some, quick lessons in entrepreneurship, Doug Villiard, and you should also be trying to figure out how you can be more active on campus while you have that time, right? You'll never have such an easy way to engage other bright students as you will in your MBA. It's like college, like undergrad, except that everyone now has work experience and knows a little bit more about what they're talking about. So don't take that for granted. The network is super important in building things out. And that's what I'm finding out right now in my entrepreneurship is that it's just a lot harder to find people to do the right things whenever you're out of the MBA program. Okay. Next thing is aligned answers on the IQ test. So this sometimes is called like a Pymetrics test. P&G has one that is like brutally difficult. And when we say difficult, it's like these tests they always say that there's not a right and wrong answer, but what does that actually mean? I'll tell you what it means. It means that these tests for like a BCG were administered to successful high-performing BCG candidates years back, and they scored a certain way as it relates to their scoring rubric. So then you take the test and they say, to what percentage are you aligned to the answers that these BCGers provided? That is what I mean whenever I say alignment on these Pymetrics and IQ tests. It is, can you answer like a BCGer would? Can you answer like a McKinsey consultant would? McKinsey has these really interesting ones where it's like you have to figure out stuff underwater, or you have to figure out how to get deer in a forest to survive through this like trek, like little puzzles. And there's a certain level of IQ to it, but then there's also a certain level of like intuition of how you would make trade-offs. So it'll be important to study up on that. We'll talk a little bit about that in the future. And then demonstrated interest. Networking, as a quick answer, networking is recorded and it is tracked. And there are ways to get referrals. And there are ways to get sponsors. It is not an end-all be-all if you don't have a referral or if you don't have a sponsor. But it certainly helps as someone who had referral power that was quite highly regarded for a very long time. And now I don't, by the way. So please don't ask for referrals because... one, this isn't enough high touch for me to actually know you all. Although I hope it will be able to be that way sooner. But also, like, I'm focused on other things. The online case. How do you come through on the online case? Concise communication. Like I said, answer as if you are a computer programmer and you're giving immediate answers in bullet points. And you're being as quantitative as possible, and your multiple choices are really rooted in what information do I need to answer this question, because I can't select all 8 pieces of information, what 4 pieces of information should I select to then give me the answer on the short response, something like that. We'll talk more about it. And then video presence for that final recommendation. Super, super important. You should have a nice camera. I would actually, I know that there's some GSBA folks on the call here. I would put some pressure on Olin to invest in 1 or 2 high quality cameras like the one that I'm using right now, and set them up in a room like at the bottom of Bauer, and you should use that because this just looks so much better. And it does make a huge difference if you're seeing like this versus like if I'm down here and it's looking down, or if it's looking up. In fact, if I was going to be in the interview, what I would probably do, and I'm not going to change it now, but I would actually push the camera up and make it, I would push the camera down and make it look up at me to create some level of authority, right? It's these small things that actually make a huge difference in online cases and in the preliminary round. On to the preliminary round. Strong fit answers. This is having structured answers. So we'll talk about the feature, example, benefit, stories. We will talk about the hypothesis-driven answers. We will talk about the STAR method and why I actually think that the STAR method is inferior to the Carl method. And if you don't know what the Carl method is, that is okay. We will talk about the Carl method, but I think it's just a fundamentally better way to answer questions. Again, one perspective, but I have a very strong conviction that this is just fundamentally better. And then compelling questions. It's one thing to ask like, what is a day in the life of a consultant kind of question, and then it's another thing to say, I have this hypothesis about the New York's culture being more associated with finance clients and this, that, and the other thing. I'm curious to know if the client portfolio has an effect on the day-to-day operations and the culture of the New York office. I don't know, something like that is really going to come across as this person's serious and they've done their research. And then the final round, this is where you actually get into those secret sauce tactics that are going to get you the offer, and that I know actually got me the offer in the final round. It is affiliation with the interviewer, being sure that you can make them like you really, really quickly. Like, that is actually an important tool in consulting because that's how you sell work at the end of the day. MDP potential. So you need to be able to prove that you can be a managing director and partner, even if that's not the end goal, right? Strong conviction, loosely held. And then fit and case mastery. If you make mistakes, it's not the end of the world. I actually made I made mistakes on both of the final round cases with both of the interviewers, and I still got the offer. And it was because I corrected, and I will argue that like my affiliation and my framework building on the case, as they shared with me, and whenever I got the offer, was unmatched compared to what they'd seen. So it's not an end all be all, but ideally you would not make mistakes in the final round, or you would bounce back very well. Parts of the case interview. Now we're actually diving into the case itself. So if you've been waiting for the last hour and a half, now is your time where we actually talk about the case. And I promise, basically the rest of this class, we're just talking about the case itself. We're going to get more into the nitty gritty. Okay. You're going to start off with the open. The open is where the interviewer is going to present the information to you, and it will probably be like a paragraph and a half with some lists, some numbers about a description of the problem presented, and the audience. Like, who are you actually presenting to? Is this a CEO? Is it an SVP? That's the open. From there, you are going to then synthesize all of the information presented. So, let's say that it's a sandwich shop that's struggling to grow revenue, and then you're going to say, okay, well, I heard that they're the third largest sandwich company in the world, and they are facing a decline in revenue, and they're not sure what is the source of this. So we were hired to investigate the source of the problem and then ultimately drive a path towards increased revenue. Okay. That is like a synthesis. Notice I'm saying the word synthesis because you should not be summarizing in the sense that you're just repeating, right? It is partially summarizing and just making it less words, but then it's also adding in personal flair, and we'll talk about that in the secret sauce tactics part 1 about how to really add flair into your synthesis. And then clarifying questions. If you don't know what clarifying questions are and you didn't know that you actually had to ask them, I'm glad that you're here. You absolutely have to ask them, and we actually have some fundamental clarifying questions that everyone needs to ask if you don't have that information. It's a little teaser for the future, but ultimately you should be thinking about what constitutes success for the case. What is the time horizon of the case? Ooh, look at that. How's that? That's pretty fun. The time horizon of the case. And then the third one is the geography, right? So you need to know what markets they're operating in. What's the time horizon for getting the problem solved? So are we looking at short-term or long-term? And then what actually constitutes success in terms of a metric? Because if you have a metric, then you can work backwards. If you don't have a metric, then you're just kind of shooting into the wind. So those are really important. After that, you ask your questions. You say, okay, I need about 2 minutes to gather my thoughts, and then we can really get to work on finding a solution. Okay? They'll say, great. You take a big pause. This pause should be at a max 2 minutes. Take anywhere from like 40 seconds to 2 minutes. This is whenever you're writing your framework, which we'll talk about in a second, but you do not need to have your framework completed in order to go into your framework. You just need to have an idea of what your big buckets are and what your hypothesis is. If you have that, you're ready to start, and then you can actually finish your framework as you're relaying the framework, which is like, that's the top-notch, top-box stuff that top consulting firms are looking for. Okay. After that, you're going to get asked a series. You're going to give your framework. So the framework we'll actually be talking about tomorrow. So, or not tomorrow, on Friday. So really excited for that session. But at a high level, it is the way in which you approach answering the question. And it normally is broken into buckets. We actually do call them buckets. So you should call them buckets in the case whenever you're presenting. And normally you're looking at 3 to 5 buckets. If you have more than 5, it gets a little sloppy. And if you have less than 3, it looks incomplete. So we'll talk about a lot of these things like MISI, mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. I'm sure you've probably heard that before. But these are really important concepts that you want whenever you're building out your framework. And we'll walk through those frameworks in the next class. And then after you do that, you finish with a hypothesis, unless it's an interviewer-led case in which you don't need to have a hypothesis after your framework. And you're just going to be asked a bunch of creative and quantitative questions that eventually do some ping pong back and forth. You end with some answers based off of those questions. Then you provide a recommendation and next steps. That is what the entire case interview looks like. It takes about 45 minutes. You'll notice that we have 1.5-hour blocks to actually go over a case. That's because we're really going to dive into the nitty-gritty of how to answer these perfectly. So you have these 10 out of 10 answers. So I highly recommend that you attend these classes. That is what every single case interview will look like. You now know the structure. Like I said earlier, if you can master an interviewee-led case, then you will be prepared for any interviewer-led case. And this is coming from someone who has taken dozens of both types of interviews. The fact of the matter is that you want to know how to take a case from absolutely nothing, like barely even a prompt, and turn it into something of substance, because the ability to work with ambiguity is so highly regarded in consulting. If you don't know how to work with ambiguity, you're going to have a lot of trouble because the consultants are getting the questions from these Fortune 100 companies that their executives and that their general managers did not know how to answer, probably because there wasn't enough information or there was too much information to actually provide a sufficient answer. So our belief here is that if you can answer a super, super, super vague question and you can lead it from start to finish, then if you have a narrow question and you're getting guidance from your interviewer that's guiding you along the way, which is typically the McKinsey style is interviewer-led, whereas BCG is interviewee-led, you'll be set, right? Like, if you can do interviewee-led, you will be able to do interviewer-led. You just need to change, like, 3 things. So when in doubt, prepare for interviewee-led because it doesn't go the other way around. Now, I will say, interviewer-led often is looking for more specific right answers, so there's a little less room to do some BS there. Just a fair trade-off. What types of cases can I expect? And we're almost to the end, so I'm going to leave some time for Q&A at the end, and I would love just write down some questions, and then I would actually love to see like a live call-in just to double-check that the feature works, but like we'll try that in about 5 to 10 minutes. I'd love if someone would come off of camera. So if you're if you're just in your drawers in your bed and watching this with a bunch of Cheeto and Cheeto Puff all over your like face, maybe put on a shirt and like let's have a little chat. I'm just saying that because that's what I did during the MBA many nights. Okay. Cases, we've got profitability, market entry, market sizing, and pricing. Those are what the first cases normally look like. All of these are pretty simple and straightforward, and we're going to talk about each and every single one of them throughout the course of the class. So just know that they exist. We'll actually figure out how to answer these pretty soon. How did I know Yabsira? It's because I've done it before. That was my COVID. That was my COVID era. You know, Taylor Swift has her eras. That was my white cheddar Cheeto Puff era. Okay, and then final cases, you're going to get some more complicated ones, like investment yes or no decisions, mergers and acquisitions cases, product management cases. I actually got a product management case and a profitability. No, I got a product management case and an investment yes or no decision case in my BCG final rounds. The investment yes no was, should we or should we not shut down a Mexican manufacturing plant based off of all this information? And then the product management question was, we're experiencing a lot of customer service issues at a car dealership and we want to know what the problem is. Okay, so that's what that looked like. Turnaround cases are somewhat rare, but you might get them especially with Bain. Similar with merger and acquisition, you might get some of those if you apply to Bain. And then MDP specific case question. So I remember my final round, my like sophomore or junior or senior, I don't know, one of the years, I was interviewing with an MDP who is now the CEO of Carnival Australia, which is pretty cool. Having that connection there, but it was for the Miami office, and she basically just walked me through her current problem that she's trying to solve, which was about Indigenous education in rural Australia and how to provide those services. And it was super, super ambiguous, which meant that we had to do a lot of like big market sizing stuff, and it was pretty tricky, but it was specifically a case that she's working on, and I think a lot of MDPs will do that. Another example was I got a final round case on product pricing and splitting customer demographics based off of income levels and based off of geographies and zip codes. And it turns out that person was actually like a partner that was working in the retail space. So something that she'd been working on. Okay. Parts of the fit interview. We'll go through this really quickly, but there's going to be some small talk at the beginning. There is a way to do small talk, so we will get you set for that because it's not actually that small. It's very important. There's the tell me about yourself, describe a time when, Explanation double clicks is kind of nuanced. So this is more specific with McKinsey. So McKinsey has the PEI interview, which is the personal experience interview. And their big thing is that they actually focus on double clicking into one scenario. So in a BCG interview, you kind of give like your 2-minute pitch of each story, and you tell like 4 stories. The way that the McKinsey interview normally works is that you tell 1 to 2 stories, but you answer like 4 questions about that one story. So they tend to wrap them around their values of leadership, entrepreneurial drive, personal impact, and problem solving. And they'll say like, all right, walk us through how this specific scenario demonstrated personal impact. Now talk to us about entrepreneurial drive and if what you did throughout this double click that we're going to explore. And how did you problem solve this interrelational conflict? So that's what that is. Alignment with firm values, and then ultimately, what questions do you have for me? So just a quick precursor. Some final general best practices before we open up to Q&A for the last 10 minutes. You should be researching non-academic facets of the interviewer beforehand. This is really important for building affiliation. So I always recommend that people go into LinkedIn and stalk their interviewer the night before and find out what it is beyond their alma mater and their current job that they have interest in. And it tends to be in their about page. And you can actually find out, like, are they a family person? Are they interested in, like, what clubs did they do while they were at college? Are they athletic? Are they not? Are they super, like, computer science analytical? Or are they more, like, super big into, like, social justice and D&I? And, like, these are going to give you an ability to have a profile that you can then confirm or negate your hypothesis whenever you're building affiliation quickly based off of those things. And there's a right way to do that, and there's a creepy way to do that. We'll teach you both, so that way hopefully you don't do the creepy thing. Playing ping pong, this is a concept that I'll bring up a lot whenever we talk about fit interviews, but I'll just leave that as a teaser. Pre-interview chat, always come prepared with a story on anything around how are you. If you say fine or good, you're not going to get extended to the next. I mean, you might, but like you're throwing away a huge opportunity to really demonstrate communication and presence. Because that's the question that you're going to get asked so many times as a consultant, because there's so much small talk while we're waiting for the managing director to get on the call. So you need to be good at this. So we'll talk about how to actually answer these how are you questions. Tell me about yourself, identify the variation of the question, and cater the pitch with a purpose-oriented answer. So when I say the variation of the question, there's a difference in how you answer tell me about yourself, walk me through your resume, and what are some other variations? What's something that like I don't see on your resume that is interesting? Like there are a lot of different things that are like, give me your elevator pitch about who you are, that are slightly different, and we actually have an entire list of that, so we'll walk through that and show you what the differences are. Tell me about a time when. Some quick things about these are like always answer in threes, always have a clear story flow, and when possible, try to use circularity. So what I mean by that is you should open with some philosophy about who you are and what you believe. So tell me about a time whenever you faced conflict because a manager was not listening to what you had to say. And then you could say, well, I believe that conflict is, truthfully, interpersonal conflict is a difference of understanding about blah, 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 right? And then you say, okay, now this is what I think about conflict. I'm going to tell you this story about how I dealt with this conflict. And then I bring it back to say, and I learned that it's actually not just a misunderstanding about, two different perspectives, but it's an opportunity to learn about how people can compromise. I don't know, something along that. Like there is a level of circularity that we will actually derive real answers for over the course of the class. Alignment with firm values. So you need to know exactly what the firm values are, and then you need to copy and paste that into your language, right? So if you don't know what the 7 big values at BCG are, then that's your first homework for tonight. If you are trying to apply tomorrow, right? You should know what that is. You should put that in your resume. You should put that in your cover letter, and you should put that in your fit interview and actually talk it through. Like, how do you resemble diversity? How do you resemble putting the client first? How do you resemble integrity? Okay. And then what questions do you have for me? Have 3 hypothesis frame questions ready. If you don't know what that means, that's okay. We've got a whole class to talk about it, but I recommend having an industry-focused question, having a personal reflection question, and then ping-ponging off of one of those 2. And with that, we are going on to case frameworks next week. So again, we're going to be talking about the 4 P's of marketing. We're going to be doing a deep dive on the Porter's 5 forces. And by next week, I actually mean Friday. And then we're going to be doing the 8 big buckets and doing a nice deep dive there. So with that, I'm actually going to stop recording. But what I would love is, I would love someone to actually just try the live call-in feature to see, just to double check that it works. And then also, if you have any questions about anything we talked about today, please put them in the chat. Also, if you thought it was a good session, let me know. If you thought I was talking too quickly, if I was talking too slowly, like any type of feedback. If you going into consulting, you're going to be ready for like a lot of quick and like blunt and like ready to go feedback. So I want to know, because I don't have a feedback mechanism right now other than the chat and then a live call-in. So with that, we've got, 6 minutes. I will be here for the next 6 minutes unless everyone hops off. But I would love someone to do a live call-in and try that out. There should be a button. And then also just any questions in the chat about anything, I will answer with the next 6 minutes.
I'm doing great. I wanted to thank you. I know Anthony had a question, but wanted to thank you. Anthony came tonight and I was like, look, Austin's out here doing great things with the undergrads. We need that. And so I definitely wanted to just extend that thank you, because I think it's going to really help Olin, really peak those ranks with these strategies. So
No,
thank you
I
again.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
And you really got everything set up, man. Like, I mean, I remember back whenever I first met you, like a year and a half, 2 years ago with Jonathan and it. Like, you came into like one of the consortium calls, and you've been doing like fantastic stuff. So I'm just glad to be a part of this journey, and hoping we can get as much information out as possible. And hopefully more people will continue to join and trickle in, and it's only going to kind of pick up from here. So got a lot of good information coming.
Absolutely. I think the height was 17 at one point.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then
Yeah.
at right around the end, it hit when you hit the 10-minute mark, like, oh, we're wrapping up, it felt like 13. So that's great. I know Anthony had a question, but I just want to say thank you on behalf of GBSA 2023 and hopefully 2024. And it just keeps rolling, and more of us can come and really build out this system. So
Thank you. And I'll see y'all on Friday. Let me answer this question for Anthony, and then I'll wrap it all up.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. So, question on how the consulting industry looks like now and for the next year. What are your thoughts? All right. Like I said, I'm going to keep everything as honest as possible. It is harder than it has ever been to recruit. I do not say that to discourage you all from recruiting, because it is like we still need to hire and recruit from schools to maintain our brand and prestige and our talent pipelines. So what do I mean when I say it looks harder than it's ever looked before? It means that for most companies, and I don't think I can be at liberty to say with BCG, even though I'm not working for them anymore, but I will say, like, from people that I've spoken to in a wide swath of Big Four and MBB companies, lateral hiring is frozen, which means that if you are not getting your MBA or getting your undergraduate degree, if you're coming in from like a experienced hire position, no one's going to be recruiting you right now. Why is that? It is because the consulting industry is unique in how it cycles through periods of growth and periods of distress. Think about it this way, and this is really great to know for interviews. The consulting industry does very well whenever companies do very well. Like in bull markets, consulting firms thrive because everyone's trying to win more and gain more and grow more, so they want the best talent. Consulting firms also do very, very well whenever the economy is poor. So think about whenever companies need to do huge mass layoffs. We're seeing a lot of this in the tech industry right now. Just think about the implications for the consulting industry as it relates to the tech industry, and that we might be having quite a bit of clients, wink, wink, that are asking for us to do a lot of downsizing work. It does mean that like a larger portion of your casework is going to be in the people and organization practice and downsizing and right sizing and layoffs and cost cutting. Like our zero-based budgeting approach and our cost transformation practice had exploded in the last year because of all of the cost cutting initiatives that we had to do. And however you feel about that, it's what's happening. So whenever companies are doing bad, we do very well. Whenever companies are uncertain, we do not do well. Because uncertainty, which is where we are right now, let me be clear, we are very uncertain. People are expecting a recession. People are expecting, actually don't have an understanding of what's going to happen to the interest rates, because you're met with high interest rates right now while generative AI and the buzz of generative AI is catapulting all of the valuations. I mean, look at NVIDIA's growth in the last year, which is sending some messaging up to the Fed, right? So no one really knows what's going to happen here. The S&P 500 continues to outperform itself, it seems like, every single day. But people are like struggling to find jobs, and a lot of these tech companies are instituting layoffs, and despite record time, like low unemployment rates, the framing of the jobs is changing because people are picking up more side jobs, which don't really it's skewing the data a little bit. Anyway, all of this is to say we could have an hour-long conversation, but at a very high level, consulting firms do well in great times, do well in poor times, and do not so well in uncertain times. They're also trying to technologize a lot of their company by working more on execution and implementation efforts rather than pure strategy thought, because strategy thought is not being able to be sold at such a premium in the knowledge economy. It's just a fact, right? So we're moving more towards implementation, and implementation is expensive. And because it's expensive, companies with tight budgets that are looking to tighten up their belts are not as willing to commit without significant investment placed on the side of the consulting firm to essentially discount or offer a promotion for their services. It just has an effect on the margins that some shareholders don't want to see for the public companies like an Accenture, but even some of the private partners at their world forums. So it's a hard time. It does not mean that it's impossible, and it actually means that if you're trying to get in, the best way to get in is through an MBA program or through an undergraduate program. So if you try to get in and you weren't in school right now, I would say there's no chance. There is still a chance, but you need to be good. You need to be really qualified, and the way that you get really good and really qualified is you continue to attend these classes. So we're going to give you the best fighting chance, So I'm in the college admission space, and in the program that we all run, it's like we can't guarantee that you're going to get into Harvard, or like in this case, like a Deloitte or a Bain or a BCG. But we can give you all of the tools to apply to Harvard to make sure that you have the best chance possible. And that's what I'm hoping to do here is there will not be a stone left unturned that you will not be prepared to answer. Then it's all just up to you. And unfortunately, it's the bittersweet answer, but the fate of the world, right? Who you get as your interviewer matters a lot. People say that luck is whenever opportunity meets preparation or chance meets preparation. You can't control chance, but you can't control preparation. So let's be prepared. And the next way to be prepared is to join on Friday at 8:30, where we'll continue to dive into essential frameworks. Does that sound like a plan, Anthony? That was a long answer, so I might have. Yes, sir. There we go. We're here for it. Okay, perfect. In that case, I'm going to let y'all go. I know I went 7 minutes over with a super long answer, but I will see you all on Friday. And tell a friend. If every single person tells a friend and we were at like 19 folks, then we'll be at, 38. Look at that for a little bit of mental math for you. Little precursor. All right. I will see you all. Let me stop the recording.